And whenever you try to govern merely by warmongering and military might, you are no longer a democracy, you are an empire. And every empire has inherent in its own being its own destruction. Because once you unleash the war dogs, they may run that way in the morning, but they soon come back home this way in the evening. Somewhere I read, if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. And in a book called From Civil Rights to Human Rights, it speaks of how Dr. King understood this, and he understood that you got to have these three movements: anti-racist, anti-poverty, and you got to stay together. And you got to stay together long enough. And you can't disintegrate like we do sometimes, us activists, because you know we kind of get tested and get mad. But you got to stay together, because you got to understand the folk that, as my grandma said, are against you. Their principle for staying together is 51% agreement. Jesse Ham told me that one time in his office. I was up there with an interfaith group, and when he said, well, I just ask people, do they agree with me 51% of the time? And if they do, then I'm your man. Well, we got to steal that one and be willing to stay together. Now understand, as I move to a conclusion, this coalition will be criticized as being naive, too idealistic, and unpractical. But that's all right, because without the constant, fresh idealism of this kind of critique and coalition, we will not even get incremental change. Unless you have somebody pushing for fundamental change, you won't even get incremental change. That's why last year we championed the call for coming together for HK on J, the People's Agenda. And you all know, most of you in here, the 14-point agenda. I'll let Al talk about it and give a flyout and go through all of those 14 points. And that's why we resisted in the media when they said, well, which one of them is most important? All of them. Well, isn't that a lot of stuff to ask? Yeah, there are 3,000 bills that went. How many bills went through the legislature? We're talking about 14 packages, so that's not a lot. At some point, we have to have a connection that folk can't divide us on. That we're not engaging in your language anymore. We're not engaging in your way of doing politics anymore. We're setting a different standard. And that's why we champion HK on J, the People's Agenda, an action plan, in order for a new ethic to be infused in the very ethic of public policy and political life in this state. We needed some new wineskin. Now, the new wineskin is not collapsing everyone under one leadership. The new wineskin is not making the NAACP or Reverend Barber or one personality. That's not what the new wineskin. The new wineskin is holding this coalition together. This anti-racist, anti-poverty, anti-war coalition together. And understand that in reality, all of us already know what the issues are. The issues haven't changed. What we want is change. It's about coming together around a common agenda and common commitments where they can't pit me against Marge or Marge against me and that kind of thing, to work together. Even, listen, we don't entirely agree on every point. But we understand that there's something, none of the points are going to really move unless there's this coalition sticking together to create the kind of energy and ethic necessary for movement to take place. Some of the things you see moving in the legislature didn't just move because it was last year. It moved because some folk are testing this coalition. And so we got to agree that it's time for change, and we got to agree that we're tired of being picked off and pushed aside, and we're tired of going along. I never will forget when Pete and a group of us went in to speak with Speaker Hackney, our friend, and we went in a different way. And the secretary kept saying, now, how many did you say was coming? I said, about 25. She said, but we're not used to that. We're used to the president of the NAACP coming himself. I said, I know that. But that's the old thing. This is new wine, baby. See, we have a constituent, but we can't do it alone. But when I keep saying we ought to be using our constituent of 20,000 to strengthen the other constituencies. Not to stand arrogantly alone. Strength is not about how alone you can be. Strength is about how many people you can pull to you with your strength. Wineskin. And for this new wineskin, you need long-term commitment toward unified efforts to a common progressive agenda that is pushed at every level and from which we will never sound retreat. See, new wineskin is sending our people back to their communities, not just with a commitment to electing individuals, but pushing an agenda. Comprehensive, agenda-based activism, that's the new wineskin. Most of the time what we do is we let the people running set the agenda and then we react. New wineskin is you set your own agenda. That's why some folk are upset with us in the legislature, even some of our friends, because they haven't got it yet. Because when we went to the NAACP convention, we gave 1,000 people a report card that gave the General Assembly a D. And remember, Dr. Hall, now we passed so and so and so and so and so. We did the 14-point agenda. No, you didn't. Yeah, well, we passed something on education, but you didn't pass what we asked. So we couldn't give you an A if you only passed a D's work. See, they said, but in the past, if we did a little something, we got an A. That's the problem with the past. That's the problem. We're not going to give you an A just because you talked about the death penalty. No, that's that old stuff. That's crumbs. You see, we're not going to give you a B because you wrote the bills, knowing I almost cursed, knowing full well that you didn't intend for it to come out of committee and you didn't intend for it to get on the floor. You just wrote the bill to appease folk that you need to elect you. Well, that's old, but this is new wineskin. We want the bill written. We want the bill out of committee. We want the bill, even if we lose on the floor, vote on it. That's new wineskin. And until you do, and so getting it written, getting it out of committee, and getting it on the floor, that's a C. You hear me? You still now? All right, that's a C. That's a C. That's all you get for that is a C. If you vote on it and don't pass it, that's a B. If you vote on it and pass it, that's an A. If you vote on it and pass it and sign it, that's an A+. But anything less, see, new wineskin. New wineskin. See, in this, you got to drill deeper. Somebody say drill deeper. Candidates, see, used to be allowed to say, I believe in constitutional education without really having to answer in detail how they were going to implement the actions of the activists. Listen, not just answer how they were going to do it, but answer and how they were going to implement the recommendation of the activists who do the hard lifting every day on the issues. And that's why we must have agenda-based activism. Not just phraseology, but an agenda that's comprehensive in scope, unifying in principle, detailed in vision. We cannot just scream at the darkness, we must shed light. And that's fundamentally what I believe HK gives us a platform to do, because it brings together the right coalition, and then when we got the right coalition together, we can have the right agitation, legislation, and litigation. And it's not to suggest nobody did anything before. That ain't even the issue. Please don't hear it that way. I had to correct somebody. Well, you're saying nothing happened in North Carolina. That is not the point. God gives us moments. There's some stuff going to happen. Yes, yeah, I can feel it in the spirit. I can't tell you. But there's some things happening. You know? When I go on campuses and young kids here, I'm on the campus and I'm just sitting around in the lobby somewhere, and before I know it, 50 to 100 of them are in the union, just sitting around. Something's happening.